Chapter 1, Prologue. What happened to the Ye family's daughter?
The Ye family consisted of 4 people who could not be more common even if they tried. The father of the house, Father Ye, we'll call him that for now, was a university professor. He was that kind of professor who didn't leave much of a mark on his students' lives, the kind that wouldn't be mentioned at his students' reunions when they remember their college years. Mother Ye was a normal housewife, a respectable woman who managed the family as best she could with her husband's slightly above-average monthly salary. The son, Ye Shuang, was a university student, average in his studies and appearance. The daughter, Ye Shuang, had only been working for 2 short years. Apart from her personality, which could be criticized as slightly boyish, there was nothing interesting to know about her. The family had a peaceful life. The parents argued like a normal husband and wife, but it never went beyond a few angry words. The son had gone through his rebellious period like any other young man in his high school years and had survived it without much fuss. The daughter had a boyfriend without telling her family during her sophomore year of college, but it ended as quietly as it had begun before she graduated. There were other examples of Ye's family normalcy, but to say more would be a waste of words, they were so commonplace. However, that fateful day, a piercing scream that shattered the Ye family's peace marked the advent of a life-changing event. The kind neighbors, bordering on the curious, rushed over in less than a minute. They knocked on the door, hoping to get some first-hand gossip. "Old Ye, Professor Ye. What's happened? Do you need help?" 3 minutes later, Father Ye, with a frown on his face, finally opened the door. He went out immediately and slammed the door behind him, blocking the prying eyes of the neighbors. Finally, he forced an embarrassed smile and said, nothing happened." "Really, nothing happened?" The neighbors worriedly insisted, "Because old Ye, you don't look so good." "It's really nothing, my wife was scared by the horror movie she was watching, that's all." Father Ye's eyes rolled back with a guilty conscience. I was caught off guard by her scream, and that explains the lack of color on my face." The neighbors gradually calmed down. Even if they wanted a concrete answer from Father Ye, more questions would be inappropriate. "If there's really nothing, then we'll go home for now." The neighbors slowly bid Father Ye farewell, since there was apparently nothing to see. A few of them even turned around with regret in their eyes as they walked away. Father Ye smiled as he appreciated the kindness of the neighbors. After the group left, he stood at the door for another 3 minutes to make sure there were no other peeping Toms before dashing back into the house. He was so fast it was as if he had teleported. Peepers, if there were any, would not have had a chance to see anything. In the Ye family's living room, little brother sat on the edge of the couch in a daze, while Mother Ye rushed to ask, "Old Ye, did anyone see anything?" "No, I don't think so." Father Ye glanced at the handsome, grimacing young man lying on the sofa behind Mother Ye, and said in a tearful voice, "But our Shuang. What happened to my sister?" "No, to my brother." Little brother Ye felt like he was fainting as his upper body slowly collapsed on the sofa. His eyes were fixed on the unconscious man on the sofa. As if acting of their own volition, her hands flew to the man's chest. "What the hell is going on?" Mother Ye angrily pushed his hands away, and little brother Ye yelped in pain. Mother Ye glared at her son and scolded him despite the pitiful pout on the young man's face. "How can a man grab a woman's breast like that? It's not possible, even if she's your biological sister." Little brother Ye almost cried in response. He pointed at the man lying on the sofa and asked, "Are you sure that's my sister?" No matter how little brother Ye looked at him, he was a real F***king man lying on the sofa. Her son's question diverted Mother Ye's attention to the man on the sofa. Her face fell, and she felt like crying again. Ma Shuang. Even if their family didn't have the traditional view of valuing boys more, no mother in the world could accept that the daughter she had raised for 24 years would suddenly turn into a son. "Stop crying." Father Ye finally stood up as the pillar of the house. He announced with authority, "We must first find out clearly what happened." He heard the scream coming from the office. When he arrived, his daughter had turned into a son, and beyond that, he knew almost nothing. With tears in her eyes, Mother Ye shared a look with little brother Ye. Then, the two of them began to recreate the situation to the best of their memory. It was the saddened Mother Ye who provided her testimony first. "I remember seeing Shuang coming out of his room, swaying with every step. It was probably at that time that..." "That's because she stayed up all night playing online games again," interrupted little brother Ye to chastise his sister as all little brothers do on such an occasion. "Didn't she sleep to play games again?" Father Ye slapped the table and glared. "Didn't I tell her that girls shouldn't spend too much time playing games?" "Wait, this is not the time to talk about this." "What happened next?" Little brother Ye pouted because his attempt to cause trouble for his sister had failed. "Even so," he continued, "then, the sister went out to pour herself a cup of water. Her hand accidentally brushed against the jade kitten sculpture you brought home yesterday. It fell off the table and shattered into pieces. I even saw her trying to hide the evidence, but she fainted after picking up the pieces. This girl is going to ruin me. She knows that the sculpture cost me 3 months' salary." "But wait, where is the sculpture?" Father Ye found the key word. He grabbed his son quickly and asked, "Where are the pieces?" They should still be on the floor." Little brother Ye pointed in a general direction. Father Ye followed his finger and saw some broken jade pieces lying on the ground. Naturally, since something this huge had happened to their daughter, Mother Ye hadn't even thought of cleaning up the house yet, so the evidence had remained. Father Ye jumped towards it, and when he got closer, he realized how different the jade pieces were. When he had bought the jade sculpture the day before, the jade was as clear as crystal, but now the pieces were cloudy, as if they were covered with a layer of dust. It looked like fake jade from the night market. Father Ye's expression was frozen as he turned with complicated emotions to look at his daughter. No, it should be his son now. Father Ye might know the reason, but what exactly had happened?
Chapter 2, Dramatic Change. How can a woman talk so openly about this?
Their daughter had become a son. This dramatic change had really put a strain on the Ye parents' acceptance. Even their son, Ye Shuang, who was an avid reader of online novels, had trouble understanding what had happened to his sister, well, brother. The whole family had lost their appetite, so they were sitting there, quietly waiting for the new unconscious son to wake up. Ye Shuang, when he was a she, couldn't really be considered a beauty. At most, she was pleasant to look at. Therefore, with such a base, even when she turned into a man, it was natural that her appearance was only slightly above average. This was observable in little brother Ye's physical characteristics. The genetic heritage of the Ye family did not have the potential to create miracles. However, while Ye Shuang was unconscious, his body was changing at a speed observable to the naked eye. Even though they couldn't understand what was happening in Ye Shuang's body, it seemed to the remaining Ye family members that Ye Shuang's physical body was changing, as if each individual cell was coming to life. They were improving and rearranging themselves into a new formula. The weakened and old cells were eliminated, so only the perfect cells remained. The potential of the body that had been silent after puberty was reactivated. The missing links in the DNA chains were reproduced. For a total of 4 hours, from morning to late afternoon, the Ye family sat quietly and watched the dramatic change that was taking place before their eyes. Ye Shuang had turned into a completely different person. Of course, this referred to something beyond sex. The skin glowed like a pearl, the bone structure was taut, making the man's physical features more exquisite, and the height that had stagnated at 160 centimeters continued to increase. The muscles that were exposed underneath the clothes seemed to flail indiscernibly before settling into smooth muscular lines. Little brother Ye couldn't help but reach out to remove his clothes, and to his dismay, he discovered that the person who had never exercised in his life now had a six-pack. While he wasn't the overly muscular type, these kinds of balanced, smooth lines were more in line with the modern eye for beauty. No matter how you looked at it, this new guy was undoubtedly a handsome man. The crystalline skin, the chiseled facial features, the long and curved eyelashes, even the hair was lustrous and flowing. In any case, definitely not a typical Ye. Old Ye. When the people on the couch finally stopped wincing and the body transformation stopped, Mother Ye couldn't help but grab her husband's arm and ask in a shaky voice, "This is our child." It was hard to tell if the trembling in her voice was due to fear or excitement. This must be it, right? Even Father Ye was uncertain. Of course, the child had to be theirs, but the situation was a bit. Maybe they should do a DNA test to confirm. Just as Father Ye was considering their options, Ye Shuang finally woke up. After the eyelashes opened, a pair of eyes that shone like black jewels stared at them. Mother Ye's heart couldn't help but shiver once more. When the tired-looking man sat on the sofa, the first impression that came to Mother Ye's mind was that they were dealing with a prince in distress. "Mom, Dad." Ye Shuang held her head in her hands as if she could still feel the tearing sensation that permeated her body since the cells in her body had changed. Father Ye was the first to recover. He rushed over and asked worriedly, "Are you awake? How are you?" In her state of consciousness, a large amount of information had been forced into Ye Shuang's brain. She knew what had happened to her body, so she understood the worry in her father's voice and why he was so hesitant to finish his question. Looking at her family's faces, which were full of worry, Ye Shuang's congested feeling from suddenly knowing so much improved. She smiled bitterly before saying, "You want to ask me why this happened, right? If I had known that breaking that jade cat could make a person so beautiful, I would have done it long ago." It was to be expected that little brother Ye would make a joke of the situation. "Sister, this is such a waste for you. If I turn into the form you have, would I need to worry about a girlfriend in the future? Don't be silly." Ye Shuang shot him down as she usually did. Mother Ye was pulled out of her daze by the sudden scolding that had escaped from the handsome man's mouth. Ye Shuang arranged her thoughts and, with a serious face, began to explain, "Simply put, this jade contains DNA." Her family looked at her with utter confusion. Ye Shuang sighed and elaborated, "There are many planets in the cosmos, and scientists have always believed that there are other sentient life forms on these planets and that they might be more advanced than us. Understand?" "Yes." Little brother Ye continuously nodded with his bright eyes. "Sister, continue." "Okay, I'll try to make this as simple as possible. A very long time ago, there was a civilization on Earth. Besides, archaeologists have already found many signs of advanced civilizations underground. You all know about that, right?" Ye Shuang, who received a dark look from Father Ye, rubbed his nose and returned to the main topic. "Okay, fine. I will continue. During those prehistoric times, aliens once visited Earth, and jade contains the DNA of one of those aliens," Ye Shuang patiently explained. "The DNA has the ability to optimize the mental and physical attributes of the recipient. At the same time, it has the ability to introduce residual memories that allow the recipient to absorb several decades of knowledge without having to study. Such a treasure." Little brother Ye, who had just failed 2 subjects, slapped his thigh, the gleam in his eyes intensifying. "But there's a fatal flaw." Ye Shuang smartly chose to ignore his little brother. This alien life form didn't have a determined gender until they reached adulthood, and their gender was formed by the first partner they chose to have sex with. In other words, after the transformation, although I am no longer a woman, I cannot be considered a man either. Mother Ye and Father Ye remained completely blank. Even little brother Ye found it difficult to follow his explanation. After a long time, Father Ye finally opened his mouth to say, What do you mean by that? Had his daughter turned into a hermaphrodite?" Ye Shuang's facial expression flinched. "This means that before the fusion is complete, I will maintain this life of alternating genders. Now, I might look like a man, but I'll probably revert back to the form of a woman in 3 days. If I wish to end this kind of lifestyle, I must exchange sex chromosomes with a person of the opposite sex when I am in the sexual form I desire and use that to stabilize my future sex. Since her parents still didn't understand, Ye Shuang had no choice but to make things very clear. To put it simply, if I wish to become a woman, when I am in female form, I must find a man to have. Mother Ye shouted in panic to stop Ye Shuang. Stop. How can a lady talk so openly about this kind of thing? Ye Shuang pouted as if she was greatly hurt. It wasn't that she wanted to spread herself so openly, it was because they couldn't understand her. How could it be her fault? Little brother Ye stopped being envious of Ye Shuang. The thought of being a woman for 3 days, and probably more than that, froze his heart to the core. Father Ye tried his best to digest all the information for the sake of his daughter. He stood up on wobbly feet and announced the end of the family meeting. Give us time to process all the information. We will continue this discussion tomorrow. Mother Ye still had something to say out of concern, but Father Ye didn't give her the chance as he pulled her into their room. Wait, we're not going to have dinner anymore. Ye Shuang looked at the door to his parents' room, which had been slammed shut. Neither of them had stayed to comfort his fragile mind. Damn! Were they really his biological parents? There's plenty of instant noodles in the cupboard. Her little brother had indeed stayed, but the first words that had come out of his mouth were devoid of any warmth. They could even be described as heartless. Ye Shuang rolled her eyes at him and looked at the sweat that covered her body. She stood up and defiantly chose to walk away. She definitely had nothing to say to this little troublemaker. Sister. Brother. Where are you going? Little brother Ye looked at Ye Shuang, who was running away with a dorky look on his face. Ye Shuang replied, without turning around, to take a shower. And to go to the bathroom, my bladder is already bursting. Okay, then, wait. Little brother Ye suddenly remembered something. He called his brother to stop him, but before the words left his mouth, Ye Shuang had already entered the bathroom. 10 seconds later, Ye Shuang walked out of the bathroom with an awkward expression on his face and quietly sat back down on the sofa. Weren't you going to use the bathroom? Little brother Ye, who knew Ye Shuang was in trouble, had to poke the bear. Ye Shuang hissed through clenched teeth, I think I can still hold back. Little brother Ye was also holding something back. He scratched his face and legs as he sat on the couch before finally letting go. Sister, a man's prostate is very important, you'll ruin it if you keep holding back.
Chapter 3, Like a metapod. Xiao Shuang's sister was depressed after seeing the man break his chopstick in half.
A real man must not only go to the bathroom often, but having morning wood is necessary to be considered healthy. Ye Shuang, after surviving the nightmare of going to the bathroom, woke up the next morning to find that life could still be worse. Having had trouble falling asleep the night before, the 2 eldest Ye family members woke up quite late the next morning. Little brother Ye, however, adapted to the situation like a fish to water. He slept as soon as his head hit the pillow. The next morning, he woke up completely refreshed. He came out of his room, and the first thing he saw was a handsome, tired-looking man cooking noodles in the kitchen. Little brother Ye's eyes were still blurry, he had just woken up. The first thought that came to his mind when he saw a strange face was his first instinct was to raise his arm to strike the intruder. Fortunately, before the punch could hit, the handsome man turned around, and the familiar look in his eyes reminded him that this was his new and improved sister. Little brother Ye patted his face to wake up. He exclaimed, how come you still look like shit after a good night's sleep? Ye Shuang really didn't want to relive her awkward morning and definitely didn't want to share the devastation she had experienced with this little monster. That's none of your business. Ye Shuang's expression worsened, but little brother Ye only got more excited. Ye Feng stood there silently and contemplatively, before he quickly found the reason for his sister's gloomy expression. He exclaimed excitedly, as if he was participating in a trivia contest. "Sister, did you get hard like a metapod this morning?" With a crack, the wooden chopsticks in Ye Shuang's hand broke in half. This was the best confirmation little brother Ye could get. He cheerfully explained, "This means you have a healthy body. There's nothing to be angry about, it happens to everyone." Little brother Ye was exceptionally elated, probably because of the jealousy between the men. "You can just tell me if you want to die." Ye Shuang threw the broken chopsticks into the trash and glared at his brother as he took out another pair of chopsticks and continued cooking the noodles. It was then that little brother Ye woke up from his euphoria. He remembered the death of the innocent chopsticks. During the previous day's explanation, the Ye family had been too stunned by the uncertainty of sex that they had forgotten to pay attention to another characteristic of the jade sculpture. It could enhance the physical and mental prowess of the recipient. However, little brother Ye quickly remembered the many interesting changes that had happened to his sister after seeing Ye Shuang break a pair of chopsticks in half with his bare hands. It made sense, since he saw the six-pack on Ye Shuang's body. Those abs were definitely not there for show. When little brother Ye came out of his reverie, Ye Shuang had already finished cooking the noodles, and she carried them into the dining room. Little brother Ye, who had many questions on his mind and a stomach that needed to be fed, rushed to follow her. "Sister, sister. Wait, tell me, have you acquired any superpowers?" Little brother Ye grabbed a bowl and began to serve himself a bowl of noodles from the pot. As he added the condiments, he anxiously asked, "Like the ability to see through walls, read minds, stop time, or predict the future? Can you please tell me the answers to my upcoming midterms?" Ye Shuang was depressed beyond words. "You've been watching too many TV shows. Optimization of body and mind is all I have, and that is attached to this side effect of sex change. If you like it that much, how about a switch?" "Sure, why not? If I become a woman, I can openly enter the women's locker room." Little brother Ye sucked the noodles contentedly. Since the exchange was unlikely to happen, he was more than happy to annoy Ye Shuang with his words. "But from the way you put it, this thing is less impressive than I thought. Other people get away with a system, a superpower, or at the very least, some sort of extra-dimensional space. It seems like a second-rate person is destined to have a second-rate upgrade." If the kid wasn't Ye Shuang's biological brother, she could have thrown him out of the third-floor window. After the siblings finished their breakfast, Father Ye and Mother Ye finally woke up. Both of them had probably prepared in their rooms, because when they came out of their rooms and saw a handsome man cleaning the dining room holding his sleeves, their reaction was less excited than little brother Ye's. Of course, it was still something they had to get used to and it would take time. Mother Ye went to the kitchen to add more variety to the breakfast while Father Ye went to the living room and sat on the sofa. He cleared his throat audibly and motioned for Ye Shuang to sit down opposite him. "Shuang Shuang." The term of endearment he had always used for his eldest daughter became incredibly awkward when he realized that it was directed at the inhumanly handsome man sitting in front of him. Father Ye choked on his own words before starting over. "I mean, Xiao Shuang." Fortunately, the name he had chosen was gender-neutral enough for men and women. If he had chosen a name with Ro or Jiao, just thinking about it made Father Ye shudder. The nickname that had been used for the past 24 years had been changed just like that. Ye Shuang lowered her head to sigh, but there was nothing she could do against the overwhelming power of reality. She forced herself to speak. "Dad, what do you mean?" Father Ye coughed and said, "I just want to ask you, what is your plan for the future?" "The future?" Ye Shuang thought before raising his head, which was as dreamy as a Greek sculpture, and said with conviction, "To get my female body back, I swear to trap a good man and jump on." Father Ye coughed violently to interrupt Ye Shuang. "That's not what I meant. Of course, it's important too, but you..." "Never mind, what I wanted to say is, before you return to your original gender, what do you plan to do about your job and housing?" Father Ye's heart bled under his stern attitude. Ye Shuang was not aware of the difficulty in her father's heart. However, when she heard the question, she started to worry. I was just thinking about that. This body, aside from bodily functions, the biggest difficulty is my job. If I ask for a day off every 3 days, I swear I'll be fired at the end of the month. As the pillar of the house, Father Ye had of course thought about these matters before Ye Shuang. That's why he had brought him in to have this conversation so early in the morning. However, to tell the truth, since this problem was so rare, even with Father Ye's experience in life, he couldn't find the perfect solution. You will definitely have to find a new job, Father Ye suggested to start with. You are currently working in an office. It will certainly attract attention if you keep disappearing from work, but what can you do if we talk about a new job? You'll have to think about that yourself. Similarly, the problem of body functions, you will have to overcome that somehow. There's no need to feel uncomfortable, after all, it's your own body. I will try, Ye Shuang promised. As the conversation came to an end, Mother Ye came out of the kitchen to serve breakfast. Father Ye sighed in relief and got up to wash his hands. Ye Shuang sat on the sofa and continued to reflect on the dramatic changes that had occurred in her life. Human beings are sensitive to beauty. The picture of the sullen man broke Mother Ye's heart. Ye Shuang was just sitting there quietly, but it was as if she was posing for an oil painting. Mother Ye, whose heart wept for her daughter, had lost her appetite for breakfast. She got up from the dining table and approached to comfort her precious one. Shuang Shuang, don't be sad, you'll be back to normal in 3 days. Mother Ye gently patted Ye Shuang on her back. Later, we'll go shopping to buy you some new clothes, it may take your mind off it. Okay. Feeling the warmth of her family, Ye Shuang raised her head and forced a smile. She nodded her head and was about to speak when the fatal image of the man with the melancholy smile struck Mother Ye, and she fainted with a nosebleed. Ye Shuang's face darkened.